He was the man every television viewer loved. Scruffy, loyal, and sharp-tongued, yet warm at heart. Ken Curtis, the unforgettable Festus Hagen from Gunsmoke, built his fame on honesty and humor. But away from the dusty streets of Dodge City, Ken carried heavy grudges and quiet disappointments. In his final years, he spoke about 5 Hollywood names that haunted him. People he respected, clashed with, and in some cases could never forgive. What drove such a gentle man to such bitterness? The truth, as it turns out, reveals a side of Ken Curtis few ever saw. A boy who grew up behind bars. Ken Curtis's life began in one of the most unlikely places for a future Hollywood star, a jailhouse. He was born Curtis Wayne Gates on July 2, 1916 in Lamar, Colorado. A quiet town on the edge of the Great Plains. His father, Dan Gates, served as the sheriff of Bent County, which came with a peculiar family residence, a small apartment directly above the county jail. For most children, bedtime stories were about cowboys and outlaws. For Ken, the outlaws lived downstairs. The clang of metal doors, the shuffling of boots, and the low murmur of inmates became the soundtrack of his childhood. His mother, Nellie Sneed Gates, worked as the jail's cook, preparing 3 meals a day for both her family and the prisoners. Ken often stood beside her as she passed trays of food through iron bars, watching hardened men thank her quietly. Those moments stayed with him, not just as a memory of hardship, but as a lesson in compassion. He grew up seeing his parents balance authority and kindness, justice and mercy, duty and love. That balance would later define both his personality and the characters he played on screen. Life in Lamar during the Great Depression was not easy. Money was tight and entertainment was a luxury few could afford. But even in such an environment, young Ken found his joy in music. He sang at school, in church choirs, and eventually at local gatherings. His voice, warm, deep, and soothing, caught people's attention early on. Yet dreams of stardom seemed impossible in the hard times of the 1930s. His parents, practical and protective, encouraged him to pursue something stable. Following their advice, he enrolled at Colorado College, intending to study medicine. For 2 years, Ken tried to convince himself that the path of a doctor was his destiny. But inside, he felt trapped. Not in a jail this time, but in a life that didn't belong to him. He would often sneak away from his dorm to perform at small campus events, and the applause he received rekindled something powerful. Eventually, he made the bold decision to abandon medical school and follow his true passion, music. By the early 1940s, Ken's gamble began to pay off. He joined Tommy Dorsey's orchestra, one of America's most famous swing bands. Shortly after Frank Sinatra left, stepping into Sinatra's shoes was a near impossible task. Yet, Ken handled it with confidence and grace. Under Dorsey's mentorship, he learned professionalism, discipline, and stage presence. It was Dorsey who advised him to change his name from Curtis Wayne Gates to something catchier. Ken Curtis was born, simple, strong, and memorable. From that point on, Ken's voice could be heard across America. He toured the country, recorded songs, and eventually joined the Sons of the Pioneers, one of the most beloved Western music groups of the era. Through hits like Room Full of Roses and Ghost Riders in the Sky, his voice became part of the soundtrack of American life. But even as success arrived, Ken never forgot where he came from. The quiet sheriff's apartment above a jailhouse where he learned humility, decency, and the quiet dignity of doing the right thing no matter the cost. That early environment, the mix of law, hardship, and humanity, molded him into the man he would become. It gave him empathy for the downtrodden, strength against adversity, and a rare authenticity that would later shine through every role he played. From the cells of Bent County to the bright lights of Hollywood, Ken Curtis carried that small-town moral code with him, and it became both his greatest strength and at times his greatest burden. Hollywood's golden era and private wounds. By the mid-1940s, Ken Curtis had carved out a place for himself in American entertainment. After his breakthrough with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra, his rich, velvety baritone became familiar to radio audiences across the country. But Ken was never content with one stage. He wanted to blend his love for music with storytelling, something that could touch people more deeply. That desire led him to host Chuck Wagon Jamboree, a 15-minute syndicated radio show in Los Angeles that ran for more than 130 episodes. Each broadcast was a mix of cowboy songs, light banter, and moral tales. A perfect preview of the grounded folksy personality that would later define his screen persona. While radio kept his voice in millions of homes, Ken began feeling the pull of Hollywood. America was falling in love with the silver screen, and westerns were fast becoming the nation's favorite genre. His natural charm, western upbringing, and musical background made him an obvious fit. In 1945, he began appearing in musical westerns, taking small roles that blended song and story. It wasn't long before he caught the attention of one of Hollywood's most powerful figures, director John Ford. Ford was a legend known for discovering and molding tough, authentic actors like John Wayne and Henry Fonda. When Ford met Ken, he saw a young man with something rare. Real cowboy roots and a voice that could melt even the hardest audience. Ken quickly became part of Ford's informal family of actors and worked on a string of classics including Rio Grande, The Quiet Man, and later The Searchers. Working under Ford, however, was both an honor and a trial. The director was brilliant but brutal. He ruled his sets with military discipline, often humiliating actors to get what he wanted. Ken learned to stay calm, professional, and never talk back. Lessons that would serve him well later during his long tenure on Gunsmoke. It was during this period that Ken's personal life became entangled with the Ford dynasty. In 1952, he married Barbara Ford, John Ford's daughter. On paper, it looked like a perfect Hollywood union, the rising actor and the daughter of one of cinema's giants. But behind closed doors, the relationship was complicated. Barbara had grown up under her father's immense shadow, and Ken often felt like an outsider at family gatherings filled with Hollywood elites. The marriage lasted over a decade, but it was never truly peaceful. The pressure of being tied to such a powerful figure, combined with Ken's growing career demands, eventually took its toll. They divorced quietly in 1964 without public scandal. Just quiet fatigue on both sides. Long before Barbara, however, Ken had already experienced heartbreak. His first marriage to actress Lorraine Page in 1943 took place when both were young and hungry for success. The relationship burned bright and fast, but couldn't survive the constant separations caused by wartime tours and show business schedules. They parted amicably, childless, each chasing different dreams. These personal setbacks hardened Ken, teaching him restraint. He became known in Hollywood as polite, professional, and dependable. The man who never started trouble, but who quietly resisted unfairness. Yet under the surface, wounds were forming. He saw how easily relationships crumbled under fame, how loyalty was rare in show business, and how success often came at the price of privacy. By the end of the 1950s, Ken had transitioned fully from music to acting. He was now a familiar face in Western films, often playing sidekicks, ranch hands, or honest men caught in moral dilemmas. Hollywood liked the type cast him as the good-natured cowboy, but inside Ken was growing restless. He wanted more depth, more meaning, something lasting. The Western world of cinema was changing fast and television was about to rewrite the rules. Ken didn't know it yet, but the next chapter of his life would bring him the role that would define his name forever and test his patience like nothing before. The birth of Festus Hagen. In 1964, Ken Curtis was offered a role that would change his life forever. Festus Hagen, a scruffy, sharp-tongued deputy in CBS's Gunsmoke. The show had already been running for 9 seasons, and the producers needed a fresh energy after Dennis Weaver, who played Chester Good, left the series. Ken was initially hired for just 1 episode, but audiences instantly fell in love with Festus. His rough voice, crooked smile, and simple but honest wisdom. Within months, Festus became a permanent fixture of Gunsmoke, appearing in more than 300 episodes over 11 years. But success came with tension. Gunsmoke's leading man, James Arnes, dominated the screen as Marshal Matt Dillon. Arnes was tall, commanding, and fiercely protective of his character's authority. Behind the scenes, Ken sometimes felt overshadowed, forever the deputy in the shadow of the lawman. Although the two maintained professionalism, insiders said their relationship was never warm. Ken respected Aries' talent but resented his control over storylines. Then came Milburn Stone, who played Doc Adams. Stone was a veteran actor, strong-willed and stubborn. He and Ken occasionally clashed over script interpretations and screen time. While their disagreements never escalated publicly, the friction was noticeable on set. Ken, a perfectionist himself, believed that every character deserved equal weight in the story. But Gunsmoke revolved around Dylan, always Dylan. Despite these rivalries, Ken poured everything into Fessus. He brought his musical timing, comedic instincts, and moral backbone into the character. Viewers saw him as the soul of the show, the scruffy, loyal voice of reason in Dodge City. Yet inside, Ken was wrestling with the same feelings Fessus often did, being overlooked, underestimated, and forced to play second fiddle. Clashes and conflicts, the five names that haunted him. As Gunsmoke grew into one of television's long-strung dramas, tensions behind the scenes grew, too. In later interviews, Ken hinted at the five figures who left the deepest marks on his life. Five names that carried more pain than admiration. James Arnes topped that list. Their relationship was complicated. Professional respect mixed with personal distance. Ken admired Arnes' discipline, but felt the star never treated him as an equal. Milburn Stone, the gruff Doc, was another. The two argued about creative choices, often competing for dialogue and ensemble scenes. Yet, when Stone fell ill in 1971, Ken was among the few who visited him privately, proof that even resentment can coexist with compassion. John Mantley, the show's producer, was the third. Mantley was strict, budget-minded, and unyielding. Ken fought him repeatedly for better pay and deeper storylines for Fessus. Mantley, seeing him as the sidekick, refused to expand his role. Their feud was open and bitter, so much so that by the end of Gunsmoke, they barely spoke. The fourth name was Amanda Blake, Miss Kitty. Their relationship was friendly in early seasons, but strained later as Fessus' popularity rose. Rumors spread that Blake felt threatened by the growing affection fans had for Ken's character. While both denied the gossip publicly, the tension showed during production breaks. Finally, there was Dennis Weaver, the original deputy. Ken never met him as a co-star. Weaver had left before Fessus arrived, but comparisons followed Curtis for years. Fans debated who was the better deputy, and Ken quietly resented being measured against a man he'd never worked with. Even after Fessus became beloved, he felt that shadow never truly disappeared. These five figures defined Ken's Hollywood battles, not explosive confrontations, but quiet rivalries that carved into his pride without second.